Hello guys, today I'm going to go through the process of how we mark out and cut cross halving joints. So first of all, go through the tools we're going to need. So we're going to need a tenon saw, a mallet, a marking gauge, a square, a steel ruler, a selection of chisels and a smoothing plane. So first of all, I'll show you the actual joint. So this is a cross halving joint. Basically it's called a halving joint because we remove half of the timber from this side and half from the other. They then slot together, making the cross. Let's get started. First thing I want to do is actually lay out my timber in the position they're going to be. So we're going to make a simple four-sided frame. Each corner is going to have a corner halving joint in. And then, so this is how we want to position it. So now we need to put in our face and edge marks. Face side should be up, so it's facing you, and then the edge mark will be on the inside edge. So for example, this one here, we have a face mark here, and then an edge, and then here, face mark here, and an edge. Okay, so I'll complete that process. And then what we then need to do is mark individual corners. They'll give them a number. So for example, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Write that on both parts, both components, so we know that each corner, where each piece goes to each corner. Okay, so I'll just do that now. Okay, so I've got both pieces here, number 1, ready to go. So what we're going to do, I want this frame to be 300 millimeters overall width and overall height. So we're going to mark out on the end first. We're going to come in, these bits of timber at the moment, I've cut these to roughly 400 millimeters. So I'm going to come in, my square is 50 millimeters wide. So for this first one, make sure your square is nice and tight up against the stock of the square. A nice thin pencil line. So that then gives me somewhere to start from. So now I'm going to place the 100mm mark onto the line, and I'm going to use that as my 0. Rather than going to the end of the ruler, it's not quite so accurate. You start to get in the habit of trying to use your 100 as your 0. So now obviously I want to mark 300 millimeters, so I'm going to mark to 400, and then I'll square that across as well, making sure stock of your square is on your face edge side. Okay, so now I have my overall length, which will be 300 millimeters. That's my outside dimension. Okay, so now what we want to do, we need to know the width of our timber here. So simply we can pop our square on, bring it up to the line, just on the line there. Then we can move our timber out of the way. Okay, so now we have our width for this joint to be cut. So on this one, we're going to take out this part. Now on this one, we need to then take out the bottom section. So now on this one, we need to transfer these lines down. Just past halfway. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that process on all of my joints. I'm going to get everything marked out first.
Sometime later.
Okay, so now what we want to do is find the centre of our timber, because we're doing half lap, so of course that's half of the timber. So So what we want to do is grab our marking gauge. I've actually got a mortise gauge, but it's exactly the same. The mortise gauge has 3 pins. We're only going to use the side with the 1 pin. That's the marking gauge side. So we need to find the centre of our timber. So let's start on joint number 1. So let's have a look here. So we want, let's double check our thickness first. Yeah, so we are exactly 30 millimeters. So I'm going to come to 15 millimeters. Little dot there. So now we can set up, excuse me, we can set up our marking gauge. We want to pop the pin into that mark I've just made. Just gently rest it in there so it doesn't move. Bring the stock of the marking gauge up. Lightly tighten it. Double check you're still there. Move it around. So I'm still on that mark. Now I can fully tighten. Making sure the stock of the marking gauge is up against your face side. Okay, so now that's perfectly centered there, and you can double check that. Flip your marking gauge over, and if it's centered, that line, that pin, sorry, should go straight into that hole again. Okay, so that's perfectly centered. Now what we need to do is actually mark out our gauge lines. Again, always working off your face side. So this one, example, this is coming out, but I'm still going to mark off my face side. So nice way to do it. Pop the pin in at the end, just a light little press, then come back to this line, start at the line, slowly push down, very little pressure, and once you get to that little dot, it will stop, and then you can go a little bit deeper. Again, just lightly pressing, slowly moving down. Okay, so that one's done. Now I can do this one again. I'll put a little dot, come back, very light pressure, and again. Okay, so that one's done. Now what we want to do is flip it end for end, so our face side is still on this side. We don't want to turn it that way because our face side will be on the other side. Okay, so flip it end for end and do exactly the same thing again. Okay, then I'll just repeat that on all the other joints as well.
Some more time later.
Okay, once you have all your gauge lines, if you like, you can grab your pencil and just pop that in that line, just so that line shows up a little bit easier. So pop them in. So now we're going to start on joint number 1. So you can use a bench hook, but for a start, I find it much easier if you actually put it in your vise so that it doesn't move around, and try and keep your saw cuts that little bit better. So we'll pop that in. I want where I'm cutting down to be just above the vise, so just above the bench, sorry, so I don't cut into the bench. Okay, so with the tenon saw, what we want to do is we want to cut on the inside of both of these lines. Of course, not on the outside because that's going to be too wide. So make sure you're cutting on the inside. So we'll start on this one here. What we want to do, get your saw up to the line, bring your thumb up to the side of the saw, come a little bit above where the teeth are, because so the teeth don't cut into your thumb. So like that there, thumb up against it, and then slowly pull back. And you can do that again. Slowly pull back. Okay, so we've got a nice start now. So now we can slowly work our way across, and as we're going, we're going to slowly bring the back of the saw down, so we're going all the way across the timber in a nice straight line. Try not to let the saw come out of the groove at the front here, because that can damage the sides here. So let's have a go. Okay, so slowly work your way back. Keeping the saw on that line. Blow the dust away so you can see where you are. Right, so I'm all the way across now. So I'm going to slowly work away back down this line, keeping the saw in the groove. Going really slow. Okay, so I'm down to my line here now. Now I'm going to flatten out the saw. Before I do that, I'm going to see where my saw is. Okay, so I've got about 5 to 6 millimeters left. So now I flatten the saw out. Nice and slowly. Ever done my check. Okay, just a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm down to my line. And then I want to repeat that again on this side. And then once we've done that one, then we're going to do some rough cuts. So what we do is we take on this sort of width, maybe we want to do 2 more rough cuts to help us remove some of this waste material. Okay, so I'll do them rough cuts now. Okay, so now we're ready to do our other line. So again, we're coming on the inside, not this side of the line. So now get that on that line again, slowly pull back, nicely on there. So I've got the saw started now, and I'll work my way back. Okay, so there we are. So the next step is what we're going to do is we actually take a chisel to chisel this out. Okay, so what we want to do first, take our chisel with our mallet, and we want to come 3 to 4 millimeters down, and we're going to angle our chisel slightly down like this. And we just want to take off just this top section first. Okay, work to the middle and then stop, come across. Okay, stop there, then come a little bit lower, maybe 2 millimeters, slight angle, work your way to the center again. Okay, and we want to keep going down like that, and then we'll go a little bit further, so another 2 mil. And the other side. Okay, so I've gone up to the middle here. Now what I want to do, I'm going to do some work on the other side. Don't go all the way through. Turn your timber round. Now we can work from this side.
Slight angle again, work into the middle.
Okay, so I've got almost like a peak here in the middle now. So I can now put the hammer down and just use my arm strength. Just gently wiggle the back of the chisel. That will take them high spots off. Okay. Thumb on top of the chisel, fingers underneath. Never have your hand here and using one hand. You slice into your finger. Always keep both hands behind the cutting blade of the chisel. So now I can come a little bit lower and I can just push in very gently don't need to push hard. Slightly wiggle the back of the chisel. Okay, and keep working that down until you get to your line. So we're going to flip round again. Okay, so now I've got a nice flat side now. Now I'm going to come across and do the same again on the other side. Okay, so I think we're ready to give that a try now. So get all the furry bits out. So we've got this one here already cut. This one here comes around here. So hopefully that should slot over there. Okay, so we're nicely slotted in. Now what I've got is I'm a little bit high here. So that means I need to take out some in the middle. Let's have a look, see if I can see which one it is. That one looks pretty good. I think I've got a little bit of a hump in this one. So we'll work on this one again. Okay, I think we're ready to give that another try now. That's it. Okay, that's sitting much better now. Nice and flush here on the top. So once we get the whole frame together, these parts would be removed. We'd then cut them off with a saw. So for our next video, I'm going to show you the same process. We'll do a corner halving joint where you actually use your saw rather than chisel out. Okay, so we'll do that in the next video.